Well, I got good news for you today. This is another episode of Unbuffered, the podcast with Chris Mitchell from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, coming to you from St. Paul, Minnesota. And today I expect no buffers. We're going to be talking with Sascha Meinrath. Sascha is the Palmer Chair of Telecommunications at Penn State University. He's been on the show a bunch of times, and he's the director of XLab. Welcome back, Sascha.
Hello. Great to be here again.
And the really interesting news is that not only do we have no buffers, now we have sound effects. So I'm pretty excited about this. You know, we'll see where it goes. But you know, I don't think I have a cricket yet, but I'm working on it.
I feel like we need the stat trombone a lot.
I do have this. Hey, all right. So no, I will not overuse that. I will not drive my loyal viewers to insanity through what I enjoy as pretty dumb jokes. But today, Sascha and I are going to talk a bit about what's happening in Washington, D.C. around privacy issues and FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Did I get that right? I just wrote FISA, but then what's the I? Is it intelligence?
Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It's the foreign part that is most confusing, however, and we'll get into that.
Right, because by foreign, they mean Earth, anywhere on Earth. So, and we're going to be talking about the Center for AI Research. And frankly, this is one of those things where I don't like to follow normal conventions. Normal conventions are you have a show, you want people to think that you're resolute and you're certain, and that makes you powerful and people want to listen to you. Sascha and I have a lot of questions and unresolved feelings about AI, where it's going and what we should be thinking about it. So that'll be reflected in our discussion about that. And then the coup de grace will be ending with a discussion a little bit about what's happening in Pennsylvania on internet access. Sascha is one of the lesser authors on a report, The Cost of Inaction, the second to the last of 100 authors. Take that, Sascha.
Indeed. I'm happy to be the lesser, given how great my co-authors are, yes.
And in 2 weeks, I'm talking with the lead author in person, and he'll be like, dude, why did you have Sascha on to talk about my report? And I'll be like, because I'm a terrible person. So this is going to be a fun show. All right, Sascha. I like poking you because I just feel like it's more fun. But let's talk about FISA and privacy issues, and knowing that you and I are recording this on the day it's going to be released, but the news may still overtake us. So what's going on, and what has just happened for the person that picks this show up on Thursday?
Yes. So here on the 28th of July, we are awaiting with bated breath the confirmation vote for Clayton, who is the new head of all things FISA related, which is to say the head of surveillance and et cetera for the United States. And FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, we have been fighting this act for decades. It has been a legal umbrella under which massive illegal surveillance has taken place. This is not hyperbolic. The federal courts in September of 2020 ruled, in point of fact, that the use of FISA to collect, for example, all of the phone records for Verizon and anyone that contacted anyone on Verizon is in fact illegal. You may be asking yourself, how does the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act enable domestic intelligence surveillance? That is a question that I and many other civil libertarians have been begging the courts to answer on a constitutional ground. Almost all of the data collected is collected without a warrant. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if we go back for a second, I think it's maybe useful. Like, the FISA process came about a long time ago, right after the federal government had significant overreach in interfering, not just surveilling, but interfering in the lives of many people, some of whom deserved it, but it was still inappropriate. So not only did they interfere in the lives of civil rights icons, they also interfered in the leadership of the Ku Klux Klan, for instance. And so those are the folks that I feel like I don't have as much sympathy for. But we're supposed to be a nation of laws, and the federal government isn't supposed to be able to just track everything that people do and say and then use it against them if they disagree with where they're going. So they set up a process, right?
Well, let's take a quick trip down memory lane. So FISA comes out of a whole national soul-searching moment, epitomized by what was called the Church Committee after Senator Church in 1978. And this was a moment where we said, never again will we allow the government to do what it had done, which begs the question, what government done? And the answer is the government had set up a massive domestic surveillance and disruption program called the Counterintelligence Program, or COINTELPRO. And COINTELPRO, from the end of World War II up through the mid 1970s, was used to disrupt pretty much everything we now view of as progress in terms of human and civil rights.
Right. But I do feel like, I mean, and like they also like they broke up the marriages of people that were in white supremacist organizations and things like that. And so like it's not just like they were trying to disrupt, they disrupted the leadership by destroying their personal lives. And again, like I have mixed feelings about this. I shed no tears. These are terrible people trying to do terrible things, but that's what they were doing as well.
Yeah, but if you look at what COINTELPRO targeted, yes, I mean, there was like a handful of right wing or, white supremacist or what have you groups. The other 98% of its activities were all against the left. And so I want to both
Yeah, you're right.
acknowledge, yes, they did both, but let's not make a false equivalency here. This thing targeted feminists, ecologists. This thing targeted the National Lawyers Guild for what? For representing the people that they were going after, which is to say, this was a wide reaching, blatantly illegal and unconstitutional program in mass that culminated in things such as, and there's a famous letter that the New York Times finally got released only in 2015, where this program attempted to get Martin Luther King to kill himself because they had secretly and illegally surveilled his adulterous bedroom activities and were threatening, extorting him to release this information. I mean, this is what was done under this program. There are still huge swaths of this program that have never seen light of day. And the 1978 Church Committee report said all of these things need to be addressed. We will set up all of these checks and balances, and one of them will be the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and the creation of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to oversee these kinds of activities. Fast forward to Snowden, it clearly is not being well overseen. And once these secret programs go public, the head of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court publicly acknowledges we can no longer control the intelligence community. They are doing things that are illegal, potentially unconstitutional. Something needs to be done. And right now, as of this podcast, FISA has now expired. Every 5 years, it has to be renewed. The powers under FISA will be extinguished, will end in March 2027 unless it is renewed. And so there's this massive battle royale on the Hill taking place right now over under what circumstances should FISA be renewed. And now let me lay out the radical position in DC today, which I hold. The radical position in DC says, yes, we should renew FISA, but only if we guarantee that before you surveil Americans in America, you get a warrant, which is to say, the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is now considered the radical position when it comes to FISA renewal.
So people who are less radical than you are considered dangerously radical by some of the podcasts I listen to. For instance, Rational Security, which is somewhat of a centrist take on national security issues. They would say these powers are essential for protecting us. And I do want to go back for 1 second to note that this is always the justification, right? If it's not for the children, it's for public safety.
Yeah.
That is the
Yeah.
nature of like arguments in this vein. And I do want to say that, like, as you noted, the government engaged in sweeping unregulated, effectively, powers of intelligence. And it did not help all of the people who were engaged in the freedom rides, all of the people who were organizing against a massive orchestration of state terror from southern states and a variety of other places that were seeking to kill fellow citizens in order to hold them in their place. And so this idea of like keeping you safe, it's always like an idea of like we're keeping a certain group of people safe. And what that means is really subject to interpretation. So we're not going to spend a lot of time there, but FISA, there's an important fact, I think. FISA did require a special judge to oversee before they did this. And then we got a sight into that, right? And we found that special judge had, like, in only 2 cases out of like decades of doing this, had turned down the requests for surveillance. So that process, like, there was a little bit of oversight, but it was a joke. Is that fair to say from your point of view?
I mean, you're being very generous calling it a joke. It was non-existent. It was non-functional to the point that the head of the secret foreign intelligence surveillance court declared publicly that they do not have control over the intelligence community. The intelligence community regularly lies to the judges, right? If you and I lie to a judge, it's not going to work out very well for us. But the intelligence community systematically was lying to the secret court, right? This isn't in like a public purview. This is like their court secretly overseeing their secret activities. And they were like, you know what? We're not even going to disclose to you what we're actually doing, what the evidentiary trail is. And again, what I want to point out is that the argument is we need FISA because it's going to keep us safe. And without it, the sky is going to fall. The terrorists are going to win. The republic will not stand. And again, there's those that say that, and there's people like me who are like, well, okay, then let's audit the program. Let's find out what it's actually accomplished. What are the trade-offs? What are the false positive, i.e. innocent people wrongfully accused? What are the false negatives where it misses the actual terrorists? And let's find out how efficacious the program is. And the argument for those saying like this program is super useful and we have to have it or nothing will work don't want the audit, which is to say they don't want to have a conversation based on the merits of the program about the trade-offs of security and privacy and all of that stuff. What they want is us to blindly follow them, to declare, yes, we got to give up these fundamental constitutional rights in pursuit of safety that they claim to exist but don't want us to actually measure. Otherwise, very, very, very bad things will happen. And if you look back, this same argument was used over something called Section 215, another area of illegal surveillance that Snowden exposed in 2013, where they said, if this thing expires, like all hell's going to break loose. And we did fight and we did get it to expire. And you know what? Nothing happened. So my question becomes like, what is so special about these programs that without them we would somehow lose all the battles, right? And again, I think you're alluding to something very bad will eventually happen. It's de facto guaranteed, right? No matter what we do, no matter how many things we put in place, like no matter how much surveillance and how much privacy we give up, and like bad things will continue to happen. In the interim, however, the question is like, what kind of society do we want to live in? Do we want to live in one governed by constitutional rights, by inalienable rights, by human rights, by civil liberties? Or do we want to live in like a lockdown state where everything you do may and often is surveilled, documented, and occasionally, far too often, weaponized against people that are doing nothing more than engaging in First Amendment rights to protest, speak out, call people to account when they do something wrong.
I feel like this is a sort of thing that people are like, Chris, why is this show so political all of a sudden today? And the simple fact is that when it comes to telecommunications like this is about politics. This is about who we can trust to have these secrets and that sort of thing. And it's about balancing, when it comes to technology, how we're going to handle the fact that these warehouses that are being built, some of the data centers that are being built, are to store all the conversations so they can go back and look back at them. And frankly, we've seen now who's in charge, right? You see Kash Patel. I don't trust him to be involved in with the Department of Justice. I don't trust a lot of these people. I didn't trust a lot of the people under the Democrats, frankly, and like this is the worst of the worst right now that we have. And but the thing that I guess I just want to say to folks is like, we wrestle with politics on this show, and it is fascinating to me how the people who are like, we can't trust the government to get anything right when it comes to like picking winners and losers between fiber optics and mobile wireless, as to like, who's to say what is better for connecting people in their homes. The government can't do that. Oh, but the government can be chosen with almost no oversight to just store all of our communications and decide how to use them. It's a remarkable switcheroo that we sometimes see. And the true opposite is also true for people who feel like, take the opposite view. So, anyway, we're gonna come out of the subject in a second, but any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, COINTELPRO was the bastard child of Democratic and Republican administrations. Section 215, FISA, these are purveyed by Dems and Republicans alike. It never ends in terms of both parties being terrible on privacy and constitutional rights. And the reason not to give the government these powers is because the government inevitably abuses these kinds of systems to target the populace. And so a lot of this comes down to not providing these powers to the federal government because of the inevitable downside risks borne by us, right? The residents and citizenry of the United States, and because of the inevitability of them being used for nefarious, oppressive, and illegal purposes.
Yeah, and I think, from my point of view, we're living through a time right now of just remarkable change where we don't know where it's going to go. It leads into our next topic, AI. But the federal government having all this information allows it to make very strong cases potentially against people that are false, but look bulletproof, because when you have all of the information, it becomes a lot easier to frame people. And so I've always been skeptical of government power. I've always thought it's important and needs to be used wisely. And it puts me in awkward situations sometimes, but it makes me very nervous to go through this. And like you said, to not have an honest discussion about trade-offs, in part because every elected official knows that if there is an attack, they will probably be vulnerable to an opponent in the next election who will say you didn't do enough to protect us. Whereas if there is no attack, there will probably not be as much of an electoral punishment for having allowed government power to run and collect all this information and use it in ways that we're only starting to see can be abusive in the modern era.
Mm-hmm. We see a narrative from both parties that if there was an attack, it's because we weren't doing enough. And if there wasn't an attack, it's because of what we have and we need more. Which is to say, the argument, no matter what is transpiring, no matter what the reality is, always those in power demanding a diminution of our privacy in order to keep us safe. That's the argument. And as soon as you start saying like, oh, let's interrogate that, let's look and make an informed decision predicated upon the actual efficacy of these programs, people are like, no, we will not do that. And that to me points to the fundamental problem, which is a lot of these safeguards. It's like, the the story about the tiger safety amulet, right? Like I sell you a tiger safety amulet and you don't get attacked by a tiger. And somebody eventually points out, like, well, there's no tigers here, right? Now, obviously there are terrorists, but they're very they're a very rare thing. And do we need additional powers beyond those that we already have? And especially powers that target the citizenry and route around constitutional protections to keep us safe. One of the open questions about Section 702 in particular, but many of these other powers, many of the other abuses that Snowden revealed over a dozen years ago now, is they've never been tested on the constitutionality of these programs. It's always been on the legality of a particular element. And the federal courts in September of 2020 said, hey, we think that there's a constitutional argument to be made. That has never been tested. I keep waiting for that kind of thing. We had to do that with Jim Crow. No matter how many times we said the way that you've instantiated this particular illegal discriminatory activity, well, folks found in infinite ways to do that. And it took the Supreme Court saying, we don't care how you did it, it's all illegal. You cannot discriminate based on race. At some point, we have to say, we don't care how you do surveillance. It is illegal to do so without a warrant because of that Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which is crystal clear. There's no asterisks or carve outs. If you want to surveil anyone in America, you need to get a warrant, period. And that has never been tested in court to date.
Well, I'm sorry to say that I don't have a lot of faith that the courts would do what we need in terms of upholding the Constitution, because the Constitution turns out to be pretty freaking inconvenient, is what I was trying to say. And that's just true. I mean, I feel like people act like there was no hard decisions that were made back in the day by the founders. They were weighing hard decisions, and frankly, they found it hard to live up to the Constitution then, and we need to do a better job of trying to live up to it now. But we also have to move on. And so I want to ask you, Sascha, about something you're involved with, the Center for AI Research. What is going on there? Because it sounds like it could be anything.
And it's a lot. So the Center for Agentic AI Research is a multi-million-dollar research and development outfit that is staffed by kind of veteran open source and circumvention technology experts. The folks that brought you a lot of the tools that we use every day to secure our communications are in the orbit of the Center for AI Research. And why did we choose to build this thing? Mainly because it is a hyper disruptive technology, number one, to all facets of society. And number two, it's also the accelerant poured upon exactly the issues we talked about in the first half of the show, which is to say privacy and surveillance within an AI mediated realm simply disappear. That you will be unable to maintain any meaningful privacy or protections against surveillance in an AI mediated world, which is a very bleak and dystopian, very near term event horizon, which is to say, as it becomes less and less possible to even purchase non-AI mediated goods and services and appliances and everything, you basically have the informant inside your refrigerator that is directly tied into the intelligence community. And we see this in like what's happening this month with people going out and cutting down flock cameras. But you also see it in terms of, I think in the last 24 hours, we had like this story come out about how like everyone that had not clicked properly in Claude had their prompts and outputs put into Google for public purview. And there's a lot of hyper like private information that has now been leaked via that mechanism. And all of that is before you get into, so do we think that the intelligence community is like, nah, we're not going to use these data, you keep it, right? Like, no, obviously the whole battle, the White House and Anthropic that has been playing out this year is all about, right? The line in the sand that they drew is one, like, you can't use this to build Terminators. And two, You can't do domestic surveillance. And the White House is like, line is too far. And they fought this huge battle, right? Like at one point, Anthropic is labeled basically an enemy of the state for saying, no, you can't use our tools to do domestic surveillance. And now, today, somehow everything's fine. And I'm like, well, what was the quid pro quo? I have to believe that the quid pro quo is we're now doing AI mediated domestic surveillance at a level that was unprecedented, impossible 18 months ago.
I would imagine so. I mean, and this gets to interesting questions that I think, for instance, I would think that if you put a lot of compute into it, you could ensure that the wealthiest were actually paying their fair share. And you could design a tax code in which you did have them not able to escape, their obligation. And again, like I'm not talking about like changing it. I'm just talking about these are rules that we've all agreed to and we should be living up to them. And that is not how the government is planning to use AI right now, right? And the people who make the decisions, because our government is flawed, we need to work on improving it. They're instead using it to make sure that they are tracking all of this information. And I feel like it is important for people to understand, like as the internet was growing, you're collecting all of this data in ways, and it's like, all right, well, fine, but like, who's going to actually be able to sift through it? Well, lots of people now. And the simple fact that the government can buy all of the private sources means that even if we were successful in restricting what the government can do, and special to being the government, it could still have, frankly, access to more information than anyone that believes in limited government should be comfortable with because of the amount of private sources. I mean, I feel like I've thought about this for decades and I've never bothered tracking it down. But like my understanding is that following the revelations of just how authoritarian East Germany was, that there were significant privacy regulations in either there or some of the other areas of Eastern Europe where they are very uncomfortable with anyone being able to have massive databases of information. And I feel like this is where we have to be thinking about for open society. Having massive databases of information, whether it's about location, preferences, metadata around telecommunications calls, this stuff is incompatible with an open society.
Correct. And you've laid your finger on the second radical position, not to fully take us back to our first topic here, but in terms of FISA renewal, it's about getting a warrant before you surveil Americans. And number two, closing what's called the data brokerage loophole. In essence, that law enforcement is saying, like, look, we're not surveilling you illegally because we've purchased the data on the open market and are using those data to surveil you. And the point being, of course, that this is a completely non-existent differentiator, that the function of surveilling you is taking place in both places. And just because you purchased the data doesn't make it any more constitutional in terms of having to get a warrant before I do a search than had you procured it directly yourself. And you have now this interplay between private industry and the intelligence community where they are just swapping intel by the petabyte on a daily basis, all without judicial oversight, warrants, or constitutional law on their side. And again, AI is the force multiplier for all of that. That with agentic AI systems, I can now make sense of these huge swaths of data. I can now find through a heterogeneity of different data, for a variety of different data, I can now de facto track you in real time, all without a warrant, via all of the different systems that we interact with, all of the different flock cameras, the geolocational systems in your car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you think, I mean, if we take a step back from the government side of this and just look at the mere fact of the databases, I feel like we're entering into a golden era, like, and I say golden totally sarcastically, of blackmail. You take a person who is church-going person, and you dig through the location data to find something that looks suspicious, and you go up to this person and say, "Hey, you want people to know that you did this thing?" And it doesn't matter if it's true or not, right? I mean, like at a certain point, it's just like, oh, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. Now I can have this person, it's a great time for the mob, potentially. I mean, I'm pretty worried about where we're going with this.
Yeah, and that era is already upon us, which is to say, you get the spam email being like, I know what you did last summer. And you're like, what is this? Right? Like, it's the first attempts. AI will keep curating and honing these kinds of spam phishings. If you don't give me like a Bitcoin before next Tuesday, I'll tell them about your porn habit. And for some group of people, obviously, they're like, oh, crap, you've got my porn. They don't. Long story short, it's all a lie.
Right, but it doesn't even have to be real.
Correct. And we have these really moribund attempts to address one tiny fraction of this, right? So like the revenge porn, the ability to sort of take photos and create porn in the likeness of individuals. And we're like, oh, we should make that one tiny element of agentic system development and make that one thing illegal. That does de facto nothing. I mean, it's very sexy to the politicians right now. It does nothing to protect us from the larger problems of agentic systems. And to put a fine point on this, there's a lot of things that we could do with technology. We can build chemical, biological, and radiological weaponry, for example. And we've decided as a global society, even though we could do this, we're going to make it illegal. Does it stop 100% of it? No. Does it stop the lion's share, the super majority of this? Yes. We need to move AI into the category of chemical, biological, and radiological weaponry, which is to say, what we're building today are weapons. These are multi-use tools. They could be used for good. They're going to be used for evil. Right now, they exist with no functional government oversight or accountability. So it keeps coming up that these companies keep doing this illegal stuff, and they're like, well, it wasn't us. The AI did it. And I'm like, until AI is actually sentient, you programmed it, you should be liable. And if you built a faulty product, well, we have rules and regulations around that. If you release a faulty product and it causes harm, you are still, as a company, liable. Somehow in the AI realm, we've been like, I don't know, it's black magic. Like something did this, but it wasn't our fault. And I thoroughly reject that. Humans programmed AI to do what it does. They short-circuited the quality assurance. They short-circuited the consumer protections. They released it on an unsuspecting public that has no idea that they have accidentally publicly released their innermost, most private fears to the Google search engine. And these are the problems that are going to metastasize and get far, far worse, not into some distant future. We're talking about over the next 18 months.
So the Center for AI Research is trying to think broadly about this, not to go after a single thing or a little symptom, but to really think broadly about how we can tackle this in a way that will, for the point of this show, which is very much focused on how technology can be used for us rather than using us.
Yes. So thinking is necessary but insufficient. So yes, we ponder these problems. We are aware and study them. But more importantly, for the general populace, we're building tools to fight back against them. In essence, we're saying, hey, look, these weapons are out there. We need to arm ourselves against their utilization. And so we're building tools to enhance privacy, fight back against surveillance, encourage better operational security amongst organizations and individuals, allowing us to, in essence, get some of the upside benefits of AI and protect ourselves from the downside risks of AI. Keeping in mind, like we're a multi-million-dollar endeavor. The folks that are weaponizing this against humanity, in my mind, are funded at orders of magnitude larger amounts. And one of the key problems here is the amount of technical acumen amongst civil society is near zero, right? We got a lot of vibe coders. That's great. Bless your souls. But that is not the same as having deep technical acumen around agentic systems. And we desperately need to bolster that. Again, not into some distant future, but like right now, today. Things are being built today that are scary dangerous and are accelerating in the speed with which the scary dangers are being built. So the latest, if we had this show 6 months ago, the latest bleeding edge models had about 300 billion parameters. Kimmy, which was just released this past month, 2.8 trillion parameters, right? You're talking about an order of magnitude jump in the complexity of the AI models in 6 months. And these things are not being used to be like, hey, how do we improve your quality of life? That is not their not just soul master. This is not like their priority. The priority is like, how do I turn this into a new resource extraction moment? And the target is all of us.
Sure. Okay. I wanna move on to the cost of inaction report about Pennsylvania and the broadband office. I think it's appropriate to apply this to most states. It's not just narrowly about Pennsylvania. It's, I think, broadly about whether states are taking action. The cost of inaction is something that I love as a concept. I'll just say that I was just listening to a biography of Coolidge, and it was interesting because it's talking about how he just really hated government waste. He wanted to narrow government down. Right, 1920s, it was a real focus. And one of the things that he had done was implemented a program by which government workers had to use all of a pencil before they could get another one. And this is the classic sort of terrible management that I think some people think is brilliant. But like, if you look at it, I'm sure the management of that program costs like an order of magnitude more than the pencils did. Like, trying to force that and to regulate it and whatnot. And it's terrible. And for someone who wants to see government do less, it's great because those people then aren't doing their job anymore. They're arguing about pencils. And so, but it's just, I think it's a reminder of how, if the government is doing something poorly, there's a cost, and there's a lot of problems that are coming about. I mean, the reason I would relate this back to internet access is when we don't spend money on making sure people can use the internet well, we are saving that money, but we are losing 10 times as much money because those people are less productive. They cost the Department of Veterans Affairs more. They cost Medicare and Medicaid more because they're not able to take advantage of less costly medicines. And that's where the money is, or medical practices. That's where the money is. And it's not in whether or not people have a good device at home. So I just feel like that's what people need to understand. And that's, in my mind, the background of this sense of the opportunity that is being missed in Pennsylvania.
Correct. And that opportunity has a name in econometrics, the opportunity cost, which is to say America is top of the class in terms of squandering money for short-term gain that costs us much more over the long term. The lack of a coherent national and state broadband plan has cost us orders of magnitude more than it would have cost us just to deploy fiber to every home in the country. And you will see
Well, I know that
opportunity cost. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. For people, I don't know how Jordan's going to do editing this, but this is measuring the cost of latency right now. As we try to have a conversation, and we're approaching like 3/4 of a second of lag, I think, unfortunately.
That's right. And I'm on a 5G network, which is to say I'm on a, North American 5G network, which is not very good at all.
No, this drives me crazy. I'm on fiber. You're on 5G. We should be able to do robotic surgery across this link. And no, it's not happening.
That's right. And so we are the exemplar of opportunity cost of a failure to have a coherent broadband strategy, which is to say the cost is that things like this are harder in the United States. Obviously, if we're doing robotic surgery, then it's like we're slicing through people's aorta. Like it's not a good thing. And it's an outlier amongst highly industrialized countries. And when I look at, for example, what America has done and what China, right, our boogeyman of the day, right, has managed to accomplish in terms of broadband implementation, it's just night and day. Like there's no comparing the successful trajectory of both countries. One has done incredible work over the same time frame that we have done marginal improvements. And that may, for many communities, be still on the horizon.
I always feel like these international comparisons come with some difficulties. I certainly think there's a lot that we can learn from others, but also, I would be happily in the middle of the two without the genocide of the Uyghurs, and from my government. So there's always, the complications of admiring some government actions too much. Let me ask you something though. My hard hitting question for you is, you detail the many ways, the myriad of ways in which the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Office has failed. And then the first recommendation is we need more of this. We need to renew it. So let me just throw that at you.
Right. So, and it's a hard thing, right? So, like, has American healthcare failed Americans? Absolutely. Do we need more healthcare? Yes. Has Social Security failed many Americans? Yes. Do we need more of it? Yes. It is in the same vein. It's like you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You run the analysis to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and you fix it. And when it comes to healthcare or social safety nets or broadband, you can basically look at like the US and every other highly industrialized country on the planet, and you're like, oh, why are we an outlier? Maybe we're doing it wrong, right? And our failure, like, I agree with you. There's a lot of complexity in doing international comparisons, but like when every other peer nation is doing better than we are, at some point you have to be like, I think we need some remediation here. Like, we're not doing it even partially well. We're doing it about the worst that's possible to do. And that is with data that we're then cooking in terms of being like, no, 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 it's all fine here because we've all got 5G. And you're like, our 5G doesn't operate like 5G in many other countries. Like, and I'm like, so it could be physics. Maybe physics in Europe or the Pacific Rim works differently than North America. Or maybe, just maybe, the business model sucks. And therefore, they're introducing lag in 5G in the infrastructure here in ways that we are not doing overseas. And that to me is part and parcel for like, we should investigate and find out what is going on. Why do we pay the most of any country on the planet per capita for healthcare and get the worst outcome of highly industrialized nations? We could investigate that and find out. And many people have, and it's pretty obvious. Like, don't privatize healthcare seems to be like the universal solution here. But long story short, in broadband, we choose both to do stupid and ineffectual tactics to bring about universal affordable connectivity. And then we refuse to even do the postmortem to say, like, what went wrong? Why didn't we succeed?
Yeah, that's boring.
When we look at the beat problem, this is the third era, right? I lived through the top era of the 1990s, the B top era of the 2010s, now the bead era of the 2020s. And it's like we fail to learn over a multi-decade period what works and what doesn't work because we refuse to even look and empirically document what works and what doesn't work. So when we say, yes, we should do more of this, it's under the caveat of we should find out what works and double down on that. And that takes independent assessment. It takes science. It takes, in essence, a willingness to do the kind of like investigation postmortem to document best practices and eliminate things that are unsuccessful. And this will go without saying, like, you talk to pretty much anyone in rural America today, and they will tell you what has not been successful has been the privatized business model Uber alles, right? That you are not allowed to do co-ops or municipal networking. We throw up all of these barriers in the way of tactics that work, have worked, continue to work. But we're like, no, we will not do any of that eventually, right? Like eventually Verizon, Comcast, AT&T, they'll serve you. And you should just wait patiently, intergenerationally for that service to be brought to your farmstead. And how dare you raise concerns, protest, or otherwise critique a model that has yet to serve adequately millions and tens of millions of Americans.
Sascha, do you feel like I mean, if you look at Comcast, for instance, it does strike me like for decades they've been saying we face all this competition. They're facing, I would say, a modicum of competition now in that AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile have dedicated a small portion of their network where they have excess capacity to market against Comcast. And frankly, I don't get it because like I would never move to like a mobile service because of the cost, the latency, and the latency isn't always this bad, but your various reliability concerns. And Comcast is really struggling to deal with this small amount of competition. It's kind of remarkable to see, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, Comcast is up there with airlines in terms of like every customer being like, I hate this, right? Which is to say, like, there is a complete disregard for the customer experience amongst a lot of these dominant non-competitive business models, right? So you see it in airlines, you see it in banks, you see it in telecommunications. And again, it's like, what is the commonality here? And you're like, lack of meaningful competition is an obvious problem. And there's no daylight between the last 2 decades of unprecedented mergers and acquisitions and consolidation across all of these industries, and then the plummeting of the consumer experience within those same sectors. And so we sit there and we're like, what can we do to improve things? And of course, the answer that we are told is we're going to have an AI chatbot help you out, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, we've just made it so much worse for everyone. Because of course, the AI chat is not there to fix your problem. It's there to uh, to demand your time and energy for the minimal fix possible. It's a war of attrition where your time is pitted against an undying machine with infinite patience in order to drive you away from anything that might cost the company any money whatsoever. And then we're like, you're welcome, right? And of course, if I had a choice, I would take my consumer dollars elsewhere. The mythology in DC is that you will just take your dollars elsewhere, but you talk to people on the ground, and in any given household, there's like one, maybe two providers for wireline service if you're lucky. And that's the super majority of all households in the country. And that's it. And so as long as that oligopoly or duopoly all agree we're all going to have AI chatbots for our consumer service, you never get the one that's like, hey, honey, we're going to give you real meaningful consumer service. And then when somebody's like, hey, that's what we're going to do. And they're like, no, 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 you can't have municipal networks here. That would be un-American, right? Like, and so you eliminate the better choice for consumers via executive or legislative fiat. And that too is what we have seen. Pennsylvania has the ability to roll out a lot more than we are, but the legislator and Josh Shapiro, our governor, simply refused to attend the problems vexing rural Pennsylvanians, rural Americans all across.
I never really thought about it. In 19 years of doing this work, you just struck it the way you were putting it together. Calling municipal networks un-American is truly hilarious because the United States is what basically invented municipal infrastructure at this level. Our refusal to deal intelligently with electricity systems led to 4,500 cities building electric light plants, of which 2,000 still operate the electric grid. And similarly, our refusal to have a decent policy of ensuring the essential utility of telecommunications would work well for people in an era of competition that we brought after the 1980s led to municipal networks. Most of the world does not have municipal networks because cities are not viewed as the appropriate place. We have municipal broadband significantly here, and I think it's a good thing. But it's largely due practically not to the philosophy that I believe in terms of local control tends to be better. It's because of the failure of the federal government and the private markets. And so it's pretty remarkable. Almost all municipal networks in the world are in the United States or Sweden, and Sweden got it from us, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, well, and it's you don't even have to look to electrical grids, although that is a very real reality. The telecommunications infrastructure of the United States, from the telegraph into telephony, when you look at the 19 aughts, right, 1900, 1910 era, The home rule telephony movement at one point made up about 40% of all phones, which is to say it was normative to have non-corporate, non-Ma Bell telephony in America. And then in 1913, Ma Bell, AT&T, and the federal government crafted an agreement, the Kingsbury Commitment of 1913, where the U.S. government said, hey, we will now allow you to have a monopoly and you will agree to interconnect all of these disparate systems. Well, what were the systems they were agreeing to interconnect? Not themselves, but rather all of these home rule systems. And what did AT&T immediately do? Completely screwed over the home rule telephony movement. Fast forward, we then have 70 odd years of ever increasing despotism leading to the divestiture of 1984. It was so bad, the government stepped in and broke up a private company. Long story short, the history of success for home rule telephony, for home rule telecommunications, is baked into the history of communications in America. And we not just forget that, we've outright expunged it from our understanding of what successful tactics look like, and now made it, which didn't exist previously, and now even gone so far as to make it illegal to use a tactic that's been proved out for over 100 years.
So I want to go back to two things as we wrap up. One is you said that the consolidation of the recent years is unprecedented. And I just always feel I'm nervous when I hear that, because I think it's important to recognize there are precedents. And the fact that if people think it's unprecedented, there's this idea like, well, we don't know what to do about it. Well, we do know what to do about it. We've lived through this cycle many times in the past of when there's too much private control over things that are collective in nature. And this is not to say that government should solve everything, but we do know that there needs to be some level of accountability and some level of public input into decisions that impact everyone. And so, like, this is very much precedented. It strikes me with the rise of civilization. And the other piece is, if you're going to keep bringing healthcare back into things, I'm changing the name of the show to Unbandaged.
Very good. I mean, so you are correct. It is precedented in form of kind. Like we've seen what happens during the robber baron era, for example, with the oligarchs of that era and the contortion of American democratic ideals, not to over romanticize what was in the past, but rather to say, look, they basically took over our federal government. What is unprecedented is the scale, that there's never been a scale, both in terms of just mere massiveness of the oligarchs. I saw a statistic the other day. It said John D. Rockefeller, one of the OG robber barons of the era, if you scaled up his wealth, taking into account inflation, he would today be worth about $30 billion, right? Which is a lot, no doubt. But like, we have centibillionaires today, right? The scale is just, even accounting for inflation, is just massive. The scale across various industries, right? The not just vertical and horizontal integration, but into entirely, like, this is like pure antitrust stuff. It is illegal, but we allow it kind of stuff. That's unprecedented. The scale of the war chests of these companies is unprecedented. The sophistication of their surveillance is unprecedented.
Let me put a point on that, because I do think it's worth noting. There's a lot of people who really admire Elon Musk, and I really don't. I really, really hate fascists and I hate bullies. And I think he's one. Let's just say that I'm totally wrong and I've misread him. He took SpaceX public. And if you look at what happened, it's exactly what I predicted, based on having looked into a number of folks that are pretty critical of him. Exactly. It's a total grift. And if you want, Ed Elson, I think, has done really good work predicting this. The point of the SpaceX IPO was to rip off the people who love Elon Musk. And that gives you a sense. This guy could do anything. This guy is doing remarkable things, whether it's tunneling under the earth or putting satellites in above it. And what is he spending his time doing? Trying to figure out how to rip off retail investors with a sham IPO. It is unreal to me. And this is the danger of that kind of scale and letting those kinds of people run wild. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah. And to give a sense of this, the IPO was June, right? Last month. And, it IPOs, it goes up to $215. I think it's now down at like 115, which is to say it's lost almost 50% of its top values. And who lost that money? Not not the billionaires and the hedge funds that when bought in when it was going up, sold. All the long hold investors, all the people that didn't realize this was a big grift, they're the ones left holding the bag when this massive, I mean, when you lose 50% of your value in 1 month, like that just is shocking. And the thing is, like, I and others were warning, hey, it doesn't actually have all the things that people are claiming it has. There was this lead in that was just a massive propaganda campaign of over promising what space does a lot of amazing stuff, but you take the amazing stuff and then you turn it into a mythology, a functionality that cannot exist due to physics, an ability to launch like more rockets every day than exist on the planet. And that's how you get to this massive overvaluation that is now being, as we call it, corrected. But that correction is bankrupting and harming everyday Americans. I don't know which hedge or which, funds for people's retirement are in there are now losing billions. I mean, Elon Musk alone, I think, has lost $600 billion. $600 billion. It leaves him only with like more than half a trillion at this point in time. But like, how many other people have been harmed simultaneously that don't have an extra $500 billion lying around to get by when the value is gone? And we see this grift again and again. Look at Trump and crypto. Look at like all of these mechanisms by which people are enriching themselves at the literal expense of everyday Americans. And that to me is like, again, one of the big critiques we have for Pennsylvania broadband is we are grifting rural America. We are offering a substandard service. It's going to cost them more over time and telling them you should be thankful. And to me, this is all part and parcel for an era of grifters across the board extracting resources for America for their own personal benefit and harming, bankrupting Americans and, frankly, the American economy. We are no longer even close to competitive across a growing number of different sectors because of the grifts that have been done. Look at solar panels, electric vehicles, broadband, like you name it. We are no longer competitive.
I think this is where we want to draw it to a close, but this is where it's just worth reminding people, I think, like our focus on accountability and being able to keep things local is not because we think it'll be perfect. It's because we think it'll be better. It'll allow us to iterate and allow us to improve, and we'll actually have a say in how things work out. And that is what is being denied to us as we live in this casino economy. So, Sascha, I want to thank you. For people who have only been listening, Sascha's been coming to us from his car, where parts of the show he may have had a little bit of road rage.
Indeed. And, just to put a fine point on it, locally implemented is locally accountable. And accountability is sorely lacking across these scaled up, quote unquote, solutions that don't meet our needs, cost more, and get, in essence, reiterated again and again and again to our detriment. And to finish that off, we are then told, why are you not thankful for these failures? And then when we're angry, they say, okay, we shouldn't do it at all.
Yes. All right, Sascha, thank you so much.
Pleasure as always.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Unbuffered podcast. We have transcripts for this and other episodes available at ilsr.org/podcast. While you're there, check out our other podcasts from ILSR, including Building Local Power, Local Energy Rules, and the Composting for Community podcast. Email us at podcast@communitynets.org with your ideas for the show. Follow us on Blue Sky. Our handle is @CommunityNets. You can catch the latest research from all of our initiatives by subscribing to our monthly newsletter at ilsr.org. While you're there, please take a moment to donate. Your support in any amount helps keeps us going. Unbuffered is produced by Christopher Mitchell with editing provided by me, Jordan Pittman. Until next time, thanks for listening.